Thank you, everybody, for coming. My name is Kevin Geiger, and I am with the Two Rivers Jaccaci Regional Commission. These mics are not actually mics that go to a speaker anywhere. They go to the camera back there, which is recording this for posterity. So all the speakers will try to be loud enough, and if anybody in the back, like Paul or whatever, can't hear us, just kind of do that, Paul. Go, huh? And then we will speak up. Couple of logistical things, of course. Bathrooms are out to the door to the right. There is an exit over there and an exit over there should we need to leave the building for any reason. Some of you may have seen the agenda, some of you have not, so I just want to briefly go over that before the directors do their opening remarks. And the first thing is I wanted to thank the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation for giving us generous support for the evening, and Kevin Peterson in the back there is from the Charitable Foundation. And so just a brief recap of what we're going to do tonight. We're going to talk about meeting the challenges of climate change in the Upper Valley. So we are going to hear from the Upper Valley Adaptation Workgroup. We're going to hear from the Two Rivers Jaccaci Regional Commission. We're going to hear from Vital Communities, and we're going to hear from the Upper Valley Lake Sunapee Regional Commission as well. All of those groups have been and will be doing activities going forward. We're also going to hear from Erich from Dartmouth about some of the state of climate change to give us some actual latest stuff. And luckily we were able to get NASA to hold off on the announcement until today that 2015 was officially the warmest year on record. So that was very good timing on their part. So without much ado, we're going to go in. Nate's going to go first, Tom's going to go second, and then Peter, my director, unfortunately was called away and could not be here tonight, so I'm going to fill in for Peter third.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Nate Miller. I'm the director of the Upper Valley Lake Sunapee Regional Planning Commission, and this is our service area on the screen. We're an organization of 27 communities in New Hampshire, in the western part of New Hampshire. To test your geography, our region goes from Piermont in the north to Charlestown in the south to New London and Wilmot in the east. So most of southern Grafton County, New Hampshire, essentially all of Sullivan County, New Hampshire, and 3 communities around Lake Sunapee in Merrimack County. We are excited to be partners here this evening with Two Rivers Jaccaci Regional Commission, the Upper Valley Adaptation Workgroup, and Vital Communities. Climate change and climate adaptation and mitigation is an important part of our regional plan. I know that a lot of people, when they think of the effects of severe weather, for instance, within our region, they think across the river in Vermont and the impacts of Hurricane Irene. Obviously, devastating impacts to Hurricane Irene. Those communities in Vermont are still recovering. We've had the same types of impacts in New Hampshire. In July of 2013, we had a storm that was otherwise unnoticed around the country that did more than $10 million worth of damage in the city of Lebanon. So these, the effects of severe weather are real. They're affecting our region, and we're really excited to be partners here tonight with our colleagues. So thank you very much, and thank you all for coming again tonight.
Good evening. I'm Tom Roberts. I'm the Executive Director at Vital Communities. I'm coming up on my first year anniversary of working at Vital Communities. So this is my first time meeting with either Planning Commission. It's great to see you all here and for all of us to be together. I'm glad some board and staff from Vital Communities are able to be here as well for this important convening. Vital Communities is a nonprofit located in White River Junction. Our mission is to work to bring people together, to make positive change on issues that matter in the Upper Valley. We work, here's our map, we work from Reigate and Bath to the north, to Westminster and Walpole to the south, from Randolph and Bethel to the west, more or less, and New London and Newbury to the east and south, serving 69 towns in the 2 states. We've been doing this work in a variety of ways since the mid-1990s. We run a number of programs that I'll mention later on when we talk. Most of them will be fit in to the conversation about adaptation and mitigation. They fit into three main areas: energy, economy, and social capital. And in addressing climate change, as in a lot of our work, we find that a lot of our programs and efforts are in the middle of that circle, of those three intersecting circles of economy, social capital, and energy. So thank you and welcome.
So as I said, I am not Peter Gregory, but he would be here. He is our executive director, and I'm the senior planner, because I've been around longer than the other senior planners. And why is climate change so important to us as a regional planning commission? To me, our job, which is so often mysterious, as you may all know because you're in the same line of work, to the general public, is really to use the best information that we have to help our communities get the kind of future they want out there. And they want one that is safe, affordable, pleasant, and prosperous, right? That's what we're all working for. And the climate change that is already locked in, that we generated from our missions in the past, already threatens those goals. And that's why we have to adapt. We need to do adaptation. However, the calamitous effects, if we keep going on the path that we've been going, are going to be so great we don't want to go there. And so that's why we need to mitigate. We need to avoid those emissions as much as possible, because they would render our goals and your goals unreachable. Meeting the challenges of adaptation and mitigation will reshape our communities. It will involve a lot of public process and a lot of discussion, and that is what we do, and we're going to be alongside our communities on that journey. And so now, Alex is coming up next.
Thanks, Kevin. Good evening. Thank you all for being here. And Kevin, thank you so much for leading the planning to help us in this evening. Look forward to working together. So the Upper Valley Adaptation Workgroup, this is basically the geography that we're kind of calling a bear hug around the Upper Valley, and that would actually be the two rivers Ottaquechee in Vermont. That would be the Lake Sunapee, Upper Valley Lake Sunapee Regional Commission in New Hampshire, and then Vital Communities is even a little bit broader than that. So when you actually take all three of those organizations, that would be what we would constitute the Upper Valley for the Upper Valley Adaptation Workgroup currently. So just by brief introduction, my name is Alex Jaccaci, and I'm the co-chair of the Upper Valley Adaptation Workgroup. I'm actually joined by Sherry Godlewski from the Department of Environmental Services in New Hampshire, who is the co-chair as well, and thanks for being here. I live in Thetford, and I work at Hypertherm in Lebanon. So our focus tonight is together to start, in some cases continue, to address a key challenge and opportunity we have as communities. And this challenge and opportunity is how to work together and address a changing climate. How to implement actions that not only slow the rate of change in our climate, but also more immediately build resilience to the impacts that we're already experiencing. So you'll hear tonight in Erich's presentation that the climate in our region has already changed in recent years, including increased temperatures, precipitation, storm events, changes in our ecosystems. And these changes have already impacted many of our lives, including increased health challenges, damages to our roads, homes, built environments, financial burdens, and increased stress on communities to respond and recover from significant weather events. We're also going to hear that the changes in our climate are projected to increase in the coming years. And I believe that this is a challenge that's going to require our best leadership, creativity, and collaboration to address as a community. So we're not here tonight to debate whether change is happening. As President Obama recently pointed out in his recent State of the Union address, the argument for change not happening is becoming a rather lonely one. He said that with over 200 nations that are committing to action, the majority of our nation in agreement, and over 97% of the scientific community having consensus that our climate is changing and due to human influence. So one of those scientists is with us here tonight, Erich from Dartmouth, and we're going to have the opportunity to start looking at solutions and leadership that will be needed to address this challenge. A challenge that I believe we're going to come to recognize as one of the foremost in our time and certainly for our future generations. So specifically tonight, I look forward to learning and discussing about what we've been doing and we can do as individual communities in the Upper Valley to address this challenge and turn it into an opportunity to be stronger. And so to help frame the discussion tonight and provide a bit of context for these poster presentations that we've seen here is that there are two broad categories of action to address climate change that I'd like to help define. And these are climate change mitigation and climate change adaptation. And I'm going to share what each of those involve. Do you have a clicker? You got it for me. Thank you, sir. So simply said, I'm going to start with mitigation. So climate change mitigation is essentially slowing the rate of change that we're seeing in our climate. So we know that the primary driver of our changing climate is global warming due to the increased concentration of greenhouse gases in our atmosphere, carbon dioxide being chief among those gases. Solutions that reduce greenhouse gas emissions, including leveraging clean energy sources such as solar, wind, hydro, are essential to a stable climate future. Solutions including reduction of automobile emissions, weatherizing our homes and buildings, implementing energy efficiencies, carpooling, even recycling. These are all important actions that we can take, and these are actions that are part of the overall solution to mitigate climate change, to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions and slow the rate of change. So the second focus of action that I'll define tonight is that of climate change adaptation. Climate change adaptation is dealing with the changes that we are already experiencing and the changes that are projected to increase. So it's a sobering fact, as Kevin just mentioned, it's a sobering fact, but no matter how much we do globally to mitigate and slow the rate of change, the climate has already changed, and we've essentially bought many decades of change based on the current levels of carbon in the atmosphere. So to say that again, the effects of increased warming and related impacts as we understand them are already in the pipeline. So these are impacts such as major storms, including Tropical Storm Irene, Superstorm Sandy. We'll see more localized storms with extreme precipitation that we're experiencing in our communities. Events such as the one in Lebanon in July of 2013 that washed out Slayton Hill Road and the Rivermere community. Impacts of flooding, damage to our built infrastructure, roads, bridges, and homes and businesses. We're already seeing the impacts of increased public health challenges, particularly for vulnerable populations. So we're seeing these as increased heat stress, with heat events increasing, respiratory illness, including asthma and allergens with longer growing seasons. We're seeing an increase in vector-borne disease, particularly such as an example of Lyme disease, with the prevalence and the increasing amount of the tick populations that are infected with Lyme. We're seeing health impacts resulting from severe storms, including injuries and loss of life, waterborne illness from contaminated water. And we're seeing mental health challenges from the challenge of significant events and recovering from those significant events that can take some time. So impacts experienced have had economic consequences as well due to the cost of repaired damage to our properties and infrastructure, and even lost revenue, such as the decline in tourism and related business, something that we've seen this winter with the very warm in November and December and the limited snowfall that we've had. So many of these challenges we have already faced as a community. And the science says that the forces that have caused these challenges are on the increase. But this is where the opportunity lies for each of us in our communities. So while I don't think the question is, will we face these challenges? I think the question is how we're going to face them. So just looking at this for a minute from a financial perspective, there's a strong business case for anticipating and being proactive in the climate adaptation. There's now research showing that adapting our built infrastructure, such as roads, utilities, buildings, to accommodate the changing climate can be a very good investment. So the studies show that for every $1 that is spent in proactive adaptation, actions like upsizing culverts, updating zoning, providing home buyouts that allow families to relocate from flood zones, moving key infrastructure, and important utilities to upper levels of buildings and away from flood-prone areas, clearing trees and limbs away from power lines and houses. These proactive measures generally save at least $4 in reactive repair. So $1 invested in pro-action to save $4 in repairs and rebuilding. So these investments in proactive thinking and anticipating changes, you have great benefits financially, but also the co-benefits of protecting our health, safety, and quality of life. And they will make us stronger and more resilient. So I feel the biggest risk, though, that we face is quite frankly the lack of the recognition of these potential impacts that we will experience and the collective will to address them proactively. So that's why I'm so pleased that we're all here tonight and having this conversation, and so many of you have taken your time out of busy lives to be here to have this conversation tonight, and that we can now start to look straight at these issues and turn an eye towards solutions. So it's going to require our leadership, problem solving, working together, and commitment to get ahead of these challenges. But that is what we will do. We have no choice. We need to do it. We must do it. Turn these challenges and opportunities to be stronger and more resilient as communities and a region. I have confidence that we'll succeed in just that because I've seen it happening. Important work is being done at the state level in Vermont and New Hampshire, and in our regions, and in our communities. I'll offer that we have primarily seen great work in mitigation efforts. Examples being solarized initiatives being led by vital communities, home weatherization programs, the prevalence of town energy committees in almost every town that I've visited. And we'll hear examples of mitigation work tonight. But where I believe we are not as far along, however, is in the climate adaptation focus. And it's for this reason that we formed what we call the Upper Valley Adaptation Workgroup, or UVAW, as we call it. So let me share a bit about UVAW. So we're a bi-state, Vermont, New Hampshire, multi-stakeholder working group of leaders and partner organizations. We formed 4 years ago, and we've met regularly focusing on building climate-resilient communities in the Upper Valley. Our work has taken the shape of public forums to educate community members on climate adaptation topics, including reaching about 400 residents from over 50 towns to date. Partnering with local businesses to advance business continuity planning, convening regional nonprofit leaders to explore shared services, and partnering with academic institutions to better understand and communicate the implications of climate change in our region. So the Upper Valley Adaptation Workgroup is made up of about 20 partner organizations across stakeholder groups, including municipal, state, public health, business, nonprofit, and academic. 3 of our key partners being Two Rivers Ottaquechee, being the Upper Valley Lake Sunapee Regional Commission, and Vital Communities. And I deeply appreciate the work that each of these groups have been doing on this topic and the work that we do together, including convening this meeting tonight. So I see that the Upper Valley Adaptation Workgroup playing an important role in our region, a role convening our leaders to study and understand the issues, a role of building partnerships, educating and informing community members, and in the future, providing assistance to individual towns to advance climate adaptation. And I'll touch on that briefly at the conclusion of our tonight's meeting. So I just want to say thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your dedication to this topic. I'm very much looking forward to the discussion tonight and working together to build more climate resilient communities in the Upper Valley. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'm going to thank Alex again, and I'm especially going to thank Hypertherm because they have been a business leader that has helped really move this along and kind of keep the wobbly toddler of the Upper Valley Adaptation Workgroup going for the last 4 years. So thank you. So hello again. I'm still Kevin Geiger. I have not changed into Peter Gregory. But this is the situation that we find ourselves in. And put in more plain language, if we keep pressing the red button of fossil fuel use, it will get very bad everywhere for everything and everyone, and we won't be able to stop it. Pretty plain condition. So why is this a discussion? And I would say it's a discussion because we humans are not great at dealing with risk and uncertainty. And so I want to talk about sharks and peanuts. Climate change is one of those areas we should be much more concerned about the risk than about the uncertainty. We are generally poor judges of modern day risk because we are generally not being attacked by something with teeth. And that's what we evolved. Those of us who did not evolve to deal well with the things with teeth aren't here anymore. As an example, peanuts, this cute little peanut there that I found on the web does not seem scary, but sharks do seem scary because sharks have the big teeth. Though, you're right, yeah. But that is not actually the case, because the sharks actually don't bother us much, and the peanuts are much, much more dangerous. So we should wary in some ways. We don't have instinctual fear of peanuts. We have instinctual fear of sharks. And the same goes for climate change, because when we say the words climate change, nothing comes to mind like if you say shark. And so neither the words catastrophic climate change nor catastrophic peanut butter, instill any fear in our hearts. So, as we think about climate change, it's actually better to think about the things that climate change may bring. Whether it's wildfire, drought, extreme heat, floods, or thunderstorm, something that gives us a visceral response, and these are my two that I will just share with you. And Pete's laughing in the back because he's Irish, and this is funny, or I don't know what. Pete and I kind of have a jovial relationship. Actually, he laughs a lot more at the right-hand one. There's stories behind there which we can discuss much later. This little thing on the left is Quiet Mill Brook behind my house in Pomfret. It usually does not look like that. It looked like that during Irene in 2011. That there on the right is me camping at Lake George over in New York in 2014 and enduring a severe thunderstorm that brought down those trees on both sides of the tent while we were in the tent. And so it's not an experience that you want to go through. You may have your own version of these events already. If you don't, you're going to. And you will not want them to be more serious or more frequent, and that's really why we need to work on that mitigation. It has been rain so far that makes us wary. It makes me wary. Not heat for us yet, but as you can see, there's a lot of heat potentially in the pipe in the future. And that's another reason why we're not so good at dealing with climate change viscerally, because we're good if the thing's attacking us now. If the lion's going to attack us in a month, we're not so good. So things in the future we tend to put off. So, in this moment of peril, we have to understand that our instinctual responses to risk are not that helpful in this situation. Instead, we have to use our brains, get a little more scientific, and try to make decisions based on the best risk information that we have, even though things are uncertain. And so now I want to talk about uncertainty a little bit. And behind me here, you see terms that scientists use about uncertainty. Specifically, these are from the International Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC. And as they note, responding to climate-related risks involves decision-making in a changing world with continuing uncertainty about the severity and timing of the impacts. Continuing uncertainty. Scientists are comfortable saying those words, continuing uncertainty. But to lay people, that may come across that they don't know what they're talking about. That is not true. They're just being very precise about what they know and how sure they are about what they know. I believe in climate change. I have moved over the years from thinking it's likely to it's virtually certain. And you or your constituents may have doubts, and that is perfectly fine. But it is not a reason for inaction. And that's because looking for certainty is a false tactic in this situation, and it doesn't serve you or your communities well. Nearly everything you or I do in life is uncertain in its outcome. We don't know what's going to happen, but we do things anyways. We take risks driving cars, we invest in stocks, might not have been the best thing lately there. We get married, we spend enormous amounts sending our kids to college in the hopes that that helps them later on in life. All uncertain events. If we had to wait to be absolutely certain about anything, we probably wouldn't do anything at all. And I raise these points as a preface to Erich's talk about what we actually know or think we know about climate change and what the models say about climate change to come. So as he speaks, we don't have to wonder, is this all certain? I may believe him more than you, but it doesn't really matter whether we're 99% certain or 66% certain or 17% certain. All that matters is that we take actions daily to avoid the risks that would increase the odds. Once one understands that climate change may entail not just a little heat, but broiling summers, 100-year storms becoming 10-year storms, which is a lot of the indication from the data so far in this neck of the woods, new diseases migrating north. We'll hear a little bit about health. It doesn't matter because the potential for those consequences to loading the atmosphere are so dire. Knowing this, the only question you really have to ask folks, if they're thinking about any excuse around climate change, is do you feel lucky, right? That's the Inspector Callahan there on the right, and then he asked the person on the wrong side of the gun, has he fired 5 shots or 6 shots? And it's a little unclear. But what if we knew he had only fired 5 shots? We knew he only had 1 bullet left there. And we got him to agree to spin that cylinder before he pulled the trigger. We only have a 1 in 6 chance of failure, only a 17%. It is likely to extremely unlikely that we will be on the wrong side of that gun. But would we do that? No, because we fully understand the risks involved. So even when we think things are unlikely to extremely unlikely, we still don't take risks if we understand the situation and we don't want to lose the bet. So far, we humans have decided to risk a lot, maybe civilization, on poor odds that the scientific community is wrong. Two Rivers and the other here tonight, and I am so glad all of you here are here as well, especially board members, because you help drive us to do things. We don't like those odds, and we are all working together for that different possible future. One where we have a decent chance of going skiing. My son went skiing today. It was very good, a little windy, but good. Going trout fishing, enjoying maple syrup. We will hear later about concrete steps each of our organizations is taking to make that future a reality. But first, let's welcome Erich. And if you start feeling that maybe the science, I don't know about this stuff, ask yourselves, do you feel lucky? And now we're going to have a short technical intermission while we hook up Erich's machine. Cue the elevator music. All right, how's that for short? That was pretty good. I mean, that was PC to Mac, the whole thing. You've done this before. A few times. All right, so my name's Erich Osterberg, and I'm an assistant professor at Dartmouth College in the Earth Science Department. I'm a climatologist, and a good deal of my research involves understanding the climate of the polar regions, in Alaska, Greenland, and Antarctica is where most of my research is. But since coming to Dartmouth, particularly the last 4 years, I've become more and more interested in studying and doing active research on climate change in New England, and become a member of UVAW under Alex and Sherry's great leadership. And it's been really a good impetus for me to really dive into understanding more about climate change in New England. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. What I want to do is tell you a little bit about what we know has already been happening over the last century, and then more dramatically over the past couple of decades, and then what the models, the very best models that we have in science, tell us is coming over the next century. And I'm going to focus it as much as I can on what's actually happening in New Hampshire and Vermont, to try and really zoom in on New England. So let's jump into it. Just first to make sure we're all on the same page here about global temperatures, okay? So this is a figure showing how global temperatures have changed since 1850 on the left, all the way to present on the right. And you can see that temperatures have gone up. We had a little interesting pause or decline in temperature here right after World War II, probably to do with lots of pollution in the atmosphere as we really pumped up industrialization again after the war. And also perhaps something similar to the little bit of the slowdown that we've had lately. So there's a little bit of natural climate change there.
And then since around 1970, a really dramatic rise. And then, as was mentioned just today, we expected this ever since around April or May, actually. The data have been showing us that 2015 was going to be the new record. And it wasn't just the new record for warmest year. It shattered the old record. It was the largest increase over the previous record that we've ever seen. And just to be clear, that 2014 was the previous record, okay? And if we look at all the years since 1998, essentially every single one of those years is in the top 20 warmest years on record. So the 2000s have been by far the warmest years, the warmest decade that we've seen. All right, so what about around here? So we could zoom in on New Hampshire, and here I'm just showing 3 characteristic temperature plots for New Hampshire. So in blue is Keene, and then in red is Durham, and then orange is right here in Hanover. And what we've seen here mimics generally what we've seen around the United States, so somewhere between a 2 to 4 degree Fahrenheit warming since 1900. As I said, the global average is around 2, but the oceans tend to warm up a little bit slower. So the land masses have been warming a little faster than that, so actually 2 to 4 is pretty in line with the global averages. Again, we can see that there was a more dramatic increase since around 1970. So in a lot of ways, this actually mirrors that global temperature curve that I just showed. We have the increase, we have this plateau around World War II and the post-World War II boom, and then the secondary increase since 1970. Not all areas look like this. It's just an interesting coincidence that our area here actually looks so similar to the global average. And of course, the cause of this overall warming is the increase in CO2. And I want to be clear that there is no debate about that in the scientific community. Okay? There are certainly, if we go back one slide, there are these wiggles, right? Like this pause I mentioned, and there's a lot of research that goes into understanding those wiggles and understanding these year-to-year wiggles around this long-term trend. But the long-term trend is caused by higher CO2, and this higher CO2 is due to human fossil fuel emissions. Okay? There's absolutely no debate about that in the science. And what I'm showing here is just CO2, methane, and nitrous. These are 3 different greenhouse gases that, and we're showing the concentrations going back 2,000 years. So this is right around the time of Jesus Christ here. And so we're looking over the last 2,000 years. And then during the Industrial Revolution, we see this unprecedented rise. And this is truly unprecedented. I study ice cores for my research. Most of my research is with ice cores. And we have ice cores that go back almost 1 million years. And we've never seen anything above 270 in the ice core record. Okay? So this is the normal high for the last 1 million years. And it appears that we have to go back somewhere around 15 to 20 million years to find CO2 levels this high naturally. And at that time, the Earth was considerably warmer than it is even today. So, as Alex mentioned, we still have a lot of warming in the pipeline. The geologic record tells us that when CO2 is this high, if you wait long enough, and that could be another 100 years, the temperature is going to continue to go up another at least 2 degrees to come to some sort of equilibrium just with this CO2 rate. But of course, we're not staying here at 401, are we? We're going to continue on up. And this is a very important figure that came from the IPCC fourth assessment report. That's the one that came out in 2007. And they unfortunately didn't duplicate this in the recent one because it's one of my favorites. And what this is showing is just how important, how you need CO2 to explain the warming since around 1960 or 1970. So this is a little complicated. So what we're showing here is in black is the actual global temperature. That's this black curve here. And then in green is what happens if you take climate models and you just let natural forces control things. So this is natural amount of CO2, this is volcanic eruptions, so you can see these downward spikes are big volcanic eruptions, and this is changes in the strength of the sun. These are the things that naturally drive climate. And if we just let that natural climate drive the models, what you see is actually a cooling trend since the 1940s. But if you invoke the actual CO2 that humans have put in, then you get this purple curve, and that matches quite nicely with what we've actually seen. So again, we're outside the natural envelope here shown by the green curve since at least 1970. In addition to temperature, we know climate's not just temperature, right? In particular, what I'm concerned about in this area is rainfall. And rainfall and snowfall, you put it together, we call that total precipitation. And it has actually been getting wetter in New Hampshire and Vermont over the last century. And this is research that Cameron Wake down at UNH, he's been doing quite a bit of research on this over the past several years. And then my research group here has also started looking into this just in the past year. And so what I'm showing here are, again, curves from Hanover, Durham, and Keene, starting at the turn of the last century, 1900, going up till today. And you can see the curves are actually relatively flat for a good part of the century. Durham might have had a little bit of an increase in the early part of the century, but the big changes have been seen recently, since the 90s. Okay? And what we've seen on average is somewhere around an 8 to 15% increase in rainfall in New Hampshire and Vermont over the last century, again, with most of it being over the recent decades. And this is actually indicative of a larger trend across all of the Northeast. And this is from our research. Wanping Wang is a grad student with me and John Winter at Dartmouth College, and he's been doing most of these analyses. So what we did is we took all the weather stations that we could find, going all the way down to West Virginia and Maryland, the best weather stations that go back over the last century without a lot of gaps in them. And what you're seeing here is anything that's in blue color means that it's been getting wetter. Anything that's in red is things that are areas that have been getting drier. And the deeper the blue color, the more wetter it's gotten, okay? The faster that increases happen. And you can see that Vermont and New Hampshire are sort of on the higher range of what we've seen overall in New England, in the Northeast, okay? So this is a regional trend. And I think what's more concerning and has more of an impact on our communities than just the overall increase in total rainfall is the way that that rainfall is actually happening. What we're seeing is more of our rainfall coming in extreme events. And there's lots of different ways that one can define an extreme rainfall event. Okay? The way that we do it is we take the 1% most extreme storms, the 1% most extreme rainfall events at any station. Another way to do it is to say anything that's over 4 inches in 2 days is extreme. And around here, that is about equal to the 1% rainiest storms. And what we've seen over time, again, looking at several places in New Hampshire, this is looking in decades, 1960s, 1970s, 80s, 90s, and the 2000s. We've seen a dramatic increase in the number of these extreme rainfall events, here defined as more than 4 inches in 2 days. And so this was a very startling figure that came out of the National Climate Assessment. This is done by researchers in America, so this is kind of like the American version of the IPCC, okay? And this came out just a couple years ago, and this is looking at that very heavy rainfall across the whole country. And what they showed is that this increase in heavy rainfall is around 71% since 1958. And that this really is a Northeast issue, okay? There's really nowhere else in the country that's seen these dramatic changes. So this was startling to us, and this is actually why we started jumping into this extreme rainfall research, because we did not buy this number. We frankly didn't believe it, okay? That's a huge change in just a few decades, right? And we didn't believe it. So we did our own analysis. And instead of just binning it by decades or doing that curve where you can't actually see the structure of how it's changed through time, here is how it's actually changed through time. So this is looking at, through time, how that extreme rainfall has changed, again, across the Northeast, starting at 1900, going till today. And what we can see is, in general, it's pretty flat, again, until around the 1990s. And then we get this dramatic jump. And what we found is that that number was wrong. It's actually a 105% increase. And the reason that they got that number wrong is because they took this change and then they divided it by the midpoint. They didn't divide it by the beginning point of this line. So it's actually a 100% change. That's basically a doubling of the number of these extreme rainfall events in the Northeast. This was shocking to us. And this is a paper that we're just about to submit in the next couple of weeks for publication. And so the reason that this is happening, we're doing a lot of research into why. What is actually happening? When are these extreme rainfall events happening? And it's a couple of different things coming together. One is that with higher temperatures, the atmosphere can hold more water. And so when you get thunderstorms, and you're basically wringing out the atmosphere, you're wringing all that water out, you get more rain during those thunderstorms. So we see increases in extreme rainfall during the summer, and that comes in during thunderstorms, like this event in 2013, where we had this horrible situation on Slayton Hill Road. Okay, and this, in general, we are seeing more rain from thunderstorm downpours, and we haven't done the analysis yet to see if this is more thunderstorms or the same number of thunderstorms, but more rain during them. So that's our next step, actually just in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be looking at that. But definitely more rain associated with thunderstorms over the past couple decades. The other thing we're seeing is an increase in rain associated with nor'easters in the springtime, especially during late February and the month of March. Okay, not so much April, May. March really stands out to us. So we're seeing more rain associated with nor'easters like this one, President's Day 2007. Newmarket got 6 inches of rain. You can see enormous rainfall totals over in Maine. And there's lots of examples of these that people can look at just over the past couple decades. And again, we're not sure if we have more nor'easters yet, or if we have the same number of nor'easters or even fewer, but we're getting more rain associated with them. So that's our analysis for the next couple months. And then the last thing that we're seeing that we all probably knew was coming is we're seeing more rain associated with tropical systems, hurricanes and tropical storms, making it up here into New England. So the biggest change that we see in extreme precipitation is in the fall and in the late summer, when those tropical systems are active. So we all know about Irene, okay? Lots and lots of damage and devastation, particularly in Vermont. But if that storm just moves 50 miles to the east, I mean, the eye of the storm almost came right over this spot, came right over the upper valley. If it's just a little further to the east, then we would be talking about devastation also in this community right here, not just a little further west in Vermont. And if we actually look at what causes the most money in terms of these federal disasters, we can see 2 things. One, again, is this increase in the amount of spending associated with disasters and emergency declarations in New Hampshire. And then you actually look at what these big expenditures represent. Flooding with Sandy, flooding with Irene, floods in 2010, floods in 2008, President's Day flood in 2007. The flooding causes enormous damage, particularly in our communities here. These are the ones that cost the most money. Okay, so that's what we have seen, and now I want to talk a little bit about what we're looking at into the future. So we really have a choice, and that's what all the models show us. It really depends on how much more CO2 we put into the atmosphere and how quickly we do that. So I always like to frame it as a choice. We have a choice of lower emissions, which puts us somewhere around 4 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than now, or continue on business as usual. And I want to make that clear. This is not some extreme scenario where we start accelerating more and more carbon than we're doing today. This is business as usual. This is we don't change our behavior at all, okay? And if we continue on that path, then we're talking about more like 9 degrees Fahrenheit warming in this region. And again, biggest changes here are generally seen in the wintertime, which, as we think about winter snow industry around here being very important economically, and also just for our sense of place here, that's going to have a large impact. And I'll show you a slide on that in a second. So what does that mean? Again, when people are going to notice this are during the extremes. You're going to notice in the winter because the winters are not as cold, and all we have to do is think about this past December to have a great example of what it looks like when that happens. And you're going to notice this in the dead of summer, when instead of just having 3 days per year when it's more than 90 degrees in Vermont, we're talking about more like 2 to 5 weeks per year when it's more than 90 degrees in Vermont. That is an enormous difference, right? And it's those sort of extremes when people are going to notice it. Sure, the seasons are shifting too, and people who are gardeners or ice fishermen or something are going to notice that, but the general public are going to notice it during these extremes. Again, we don't generally think about heat as a shark with teeth, right? We think about it more like a peanut, I guess. But if we actually think about or look at the data on fatalities, heat is number 1, okay? Heat causes a great amount of distress, particularly in at-risk populations, small children, the chronically ill, and seniors. And we can look at lots of examples. The most recent and devastating one was in 2003, a heat wave in Europe. Over 40,000 deaths associated with this heat wave. And that's a robust number, and it's probably on the low side. Okay, and again, these were at-risk populations, and the reason it was so devastating, and particularly in France, where the temperature was hottest, is because they don't have a whole lot of air conditioning. They don't have a lot of infrastructure to deal with that heat. And I think if we think about this in our communities, we're in a similar situation, right? 90-degree days in Texas, they're used to it. 90-degree days around here is not something a lot of our communities are already adapted to dealing with. One thing that we actually just put in a proposal for this last week, me and some other colleagues at Dartmouth, and that's looking at Lyme disease. We've had this dramatic increase in the prevalence of Lyme disease in New Hampshire, Vermont. Here's 2001 cases, and here's 2013. Okay, you can see it in time series here, just over the past few years. This is a dramatic change in the amount of Lyme disease, and this is not all climate. Okay, this is partially understanding how the rodents and the deer are migrating, how land uses have changed, and probably also climate. So we're not sure, that's why I put a question mark here, but we suspect climate is involved here. And this struck home for me. My 5-year-old was diagnosed with Lyme in November, and he actually was not diagnosed for 3 or 4 months, so it wasn't until he started getting the arthritis symptoms that we actually were able to notice it. So this is happening. My wife's a pediatrician. She started in this area being a pediatrician here. She can't believe the increase in the number of cases she sees just on a day-to-day basis in the summer. And then again, we're going to continue to get wetter. Overall, somewhere around 12 to 20% is what the best models show, but I want to emphasize that the models are much better at temperature than they are at rainfall. Okay, so there are bigger error bars, I would say, less certainty on these numbers for rain than for temperature, although all the indications are that we're going to get wetter in this region. Contrastly, if you live in a place like the American Southwest, it's going to get drier. So that's bad for them, right? Because they're already dry. So in general, with climate change, wet areas get wetter, dry areas get drier. And we are a wet area. And the one that I worry more about is, again, the extreme precipitation. Again, these very heavy rainfall events, we're looking at more like a 2 to 3-fold increase by the end of the century. All right, now, as I mentioned, these hurricanes are a particular problem. And the reason that I'm worried about them in the future and why we've already seen this increase is because the ones that actually make it all the way up and impact northern New England here are generally big hurricanes when they're down here, okay? Irene, Sandy, these were all big, big hurricanes down here. Now, they weren't still category 3, 4, 5 when they got to us, right? They're tropical storms or even not even that anymore. But they were big ones down here. And what the models show is that in the future, we should see fewer hurricanes in general. But we will see more of the storms that are the category 3 to 5. And these are the ones that make it up to us. Okay? So I think that's why we have to worry about this extreme precip in the future. So fewer weak hurricanes, but more strong hurricanes. And then the last thing I want to mention is this winter tourism industry. So with the higher temperatures and with more rainfall in the winter, okay, that's a big problem, is rainfall in the winter if you're a ski industry. We're going to see a pretty dramatic decrease, somewhere around a month, right, from 120 days down to somewhere around 90 days in the higher scenarios in terms of the days with snow cover. And there was a nice analysis done on the winter tourism industry showing that under the higher emission scenarios, the business as usual, the viable ski areas, the ones in green, are really restricted to areas around Sunday River and Sugarloaf. Basically, in most of New Hampshire and Vermont, they're only partially viable or not viable at all anymore. And you can see the ski industry is already adapting to this, right? They're opening up water parks. They're billing themselves now as year-round resort destinations, not just as ski areas. They know the writing's on the wall. All right, I want to emphasize that Cameron Wake has done a lot of this research that I've shown here today, so I want to give him due credit. He has a whole lot of really amazing products on his website. If you're interested in reading more details about this, I would go to this website, climatesolutionsnewengland.org, and you can find downloads to all the stuff that I've shown here. And so here's a little summary, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that folks might have. Yeah?
A comment. Some years back, at one of our meetings of the Upper Valley Lake Sunapee Regional Planning Commission, we had a representative from what's OED, Office of Economic
Development.
OEP?
OEP.
Office of Energy and Planning?
And they were talking about changing of climate that we'd be seeing, and the comment made, and this was probably 4 or 5 years ago at least, was that probably within 70 years, we should expect our climate up here to be similar to what it is in North Carolina today.
Yeah, so...
And with the changes in climate, you know, you mentioned the ski industry, but I mean, what that would mean if we get climate like North Carolina, we'll have the same kind of, you know, maple syrup crop that they have down there and other benefits.
Yeah, so this is, I did a little analysis myself on this. So the North Carolina climate is in the summertime. So that's a combination of temperature and higher humidity. So that's like the heat index is going to feel more. In the summertime, it'll feel more like North Carolina. In the wintertime, it's going to feel more like Northwest New Jersey. So 9 degrees is, this is Township in Northwest New Jersey, and this is what it looks like in a typical winter there. The ski industry here is only viable during unusually large snow years. So imagine Stowe looking more like this. And again, it's not hard to imagine. This is what it looked like in December, right? So you're still going to have your snowy years, and you're still going to have your unusually dry years. So if this is your sort of average, then you can imagine what the warmer and less.
Has anyone been systematically measuring greenhouse gas emissions in this area over the years, over a, say, a multi-year period of time?
So actually trying to attribute emissions to specific
To this
sectors
region.
in this region?
Yeah.
It's a great question.
Rolling it up.
I mean, Cameron certainly would probably know that more than anyone else in the region, because in addition to doing, I mean, he's a climate scientist like me. We actually work on ice core projects together, but a lot of his work in the community is associated with CO2 emissions.
Okay.
So actually, you might find that sort of information on that same webpage.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
You were talking primarily about CO2 emissions, but you also had methane
Yeah.
emissions mentioned earlier in
Yeah.
your talk. How much of a contribution is the methane to the?
It's a great question.
problem?
So methane, there's a really fundamental difference between CO2 and methane, and that is that methane stays in the atmosphere for about 15 years. So if we stop emitting methane, then the impacts of the methane disappear within a couple of decades. CO2 stays in the atmosphere for hundreds of years. Okay? And so that is why we focus so much on CO2. In terms of attribution of change, it's about 2 to 1. CO2 has a double the impact that methane does. But methane is important. But the reason we focus so much on CO2 is that once it's up there, essentially it's up there. Unless we actually have technology to literally suck it out of the atmosphere and then store it back in the ground, which is personally where I think we're going to end up in a century or sooner, then it's going to stay up there.
Isn't that the problem they're having in LA with methane?
So yeah, in LA, they've got this huge methane leak right now, and that is probably causing a local warming effect. But again, once they shut that off, that methane is going to disperse pretty quickly, whereas CO2 is going to stick around for a long time. It's a fundamental difference between the properties of those two gases. Yeah.
Do you have any models that predict how the population may change as this area gets warmer because it'll be less threatening to people in the winter to live up here?
It's a great question. I don't personally, but I'm sure sociologists or those sort of people might. I think the bigger trend that I've heard people talk about is the return of the people who fled to the American Southwest. Not fled, migrated to the Southwest. Not fled. We love it here. But went to the Southwest. As that gets drier and drier and higher, that's going to become a more inhospitable environment, and we might see people coming back. I mean, if you're going to live in the United States in a climate change world, New England is a good place to be, right? We're sure we're going to have more flooding, but we're not all that hot yet compared to, say, the rest of the country. We're pretty far north, so we have, you can think of it as we have room to get warmer, and we're not a place that is really extremely dry and getting drier like the American Southwest, like California and their drought for the last 4 years. So if you look at impacts across the country, this is not a bad place to be, relatively speaking, but I still think we can agree that we would like to see these outcomes.
Right, and you mentioned more flooding, but flooding up here is from rains, and that we can work to mitigate through larger culverts and such, and directing the way that rainfall falls. So issues like Lebanon a couple of years ago and Irene over here in Vermont, we can plan ahead for that and try to mitigate that more as we go forward.
Yep.
But I think there are some very serious other aspects of this that aren't being discussed, such as positive feedbacks with permafrost methane and the impacts to the entire system should that permafrost melt and the methane be released all at once. And we are seeing evidence of methane seeping out from the ocean at an increased rate and the Arctic. There's a professor in Alaska who likes to explode methane plumes under ice. I think that perhaps that's being left out of the conversation because it's theoretical, but I think it's important for us to recognize that we shouldn't assume that that the food supply will remain stable either. I think that there are a lot of unknowns going forward, and it's more than simply that we have a place to go skiing.
Oh, absolutely. No, and I didn't mean to suggest that it's just about having a place to go skiing. And I think your point is well taken in that there are a lot of positive feedbacks in the climate system. We can see this throughout the geological record, that changes don't always just happen slowly, they can happen dramatically, and that we can't always predict those ahead of time. So the methane in the permafrost is a great example. The reason it's not often talked about right now is that that is still an area of active scientific research. There's some evidence to suggest that the bacteria in the permafrost actually consume the methane as fast as it gets released, and it's not as big of an issue as we thought 5 years ago. But maybe 5 years from now, we'll find that that's not quite right either. So it's very active research, it's constantly evolving. But you're right, there are all these little nuances here, some of which can become major challenges as we go forward that we don't have a full grasp on yet. Yeah.
To what extent would reforestation act as a significantly increased CO2 sink?
Around here or globally?
Well, both.
I mean, around here, we've actually done a really good job of reforesting, right? We were basically clear-cut 100, 150 years ago.
Right.
Globally, it could have an impact, but it's certainly not going to offset the increases in CO2 just from fossil fuel burning. It's a part of a solution, and the way that we like to think of these is, little wedges that you can take out of the total CO2, and that's one of the important ones, reforestation, that people can think about. But around here, we're actually fairly well forested, and so I don't know how much of an opportunity there is locally for that sort of plan. We should probably...
Yeah. We're going to go on to the next presentation. Thank you. Don't go away because you have to undo the technological miracle. While he's doing that, though, I'll begin a little bit. We've obviously heard about some of the challenges facing us, and like any good folks here, we kind of start you on the maybe the worst things, and then we end on the up note. And I just need to make sure that this is up there, and it's not for some reason. Very good. You got it? Yep, I think so. Because that was just a placeholder for you. So let's see. Da-da, da-da, da. Here we go. Good. So now we're going to hear about some action because a lot of good things are going on, and we are attacking both the adaptation and the mitigation side. We had the Paris Agreement a month ago. A lot of people felt that that was a great victory. Other people felt, well, that was a good first step, but we're going to need the action. And so now it's time to talk about some action that's actually taking place tonight by our organizations. And I will lead off at what Two Rivers is doing, and then Nate will follow, and Tom will bet cleanup on that. And so I would say our mitigation actions are taking place in three areas: reducing transportation emissions, reducing energy use, which obviously there's emissions when you make the energy, and then increasing renewable supplies so that we still have some energy, but it is not loading the atmosphere like we don't want. And transportation is probably our biggest area of action in terms of mitigation, and that is proper because it's also the biggest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions in Vermont. And one small example is we have worked with the state of Vermont and our towns to increase park and rides. And if we have more park and rides, we can have more commuters, we have more carpooling, we have less greenhouse gases in there. We have a a goal, a regional goal, to have a park and ride at each interstate exit, and we're not there yet, but we're working on it. Our land use policies also obviously have a big effect on greenhouse gas, where we want our downtowns and villages vibrant and dense enough to be walkable and served by transit. And in so doing that, we can reduce the number of trips people are making by car, and that will, of course, also reduce emissions. Reducing energy use. This is one of those maybe less known projects of ours. We actually had some special money when the, what was that called? The stimulus bill, whatever they called that thing, came out. They actually had energy money for counties, but they looked at Vermont and they said, well, you don't really have any county government, so you're not going to get the money. And we said, we're kind of like county government. We're the closest thing. And we got them to agree, and so we actually got money, and we did things like help our towns actually do energy audits of some of their town buildings, and then you can get these colorful pictures. We'll show you where all your heat's leaking out, that type of thing. We helped towns like Hartford look at their streetlights, not only where converting them to LED, using less, but where do you not need any streetlights at all. And Hartford is saving tens of thousands of dollars every year just on its streetlights than from what it used to. And we write energy chapters, in town plans, and of course, an energy chapter in our regional plan. Last, on energy, we want to increase renewables. That's obviously, this is from the state energy plan. It's going to take more solar, more wind, maybe more hydro, maybe burning a little of that methane, maybe a little more biomass. How we do this, if we do this, is really not a question if we want to meet the goals. How we do this, where, what does it look like? Is it one big thing, a bunch of small things? All those type of talks, lots of talks between regional planning commissions and towns and the state. But given the way carbon dioxide works, as Erich explained, or the heat's going to build, and so we must adapt as well as mitigate. And this here is the Walker's house in Bridgewater. And the reason it doesn't look like a house is because the house isn't there anymore. You can actually see the foundation. This foundation didn't move. That is where their foundation was. The river is now where their house was. And so our adaptation efforts in Two Rivers are largely focused around flooding and flood risk. And we don't want to see any more of that. That was a tragic event. Luckily, nobody lost their lives in things like this in Vermont, merely because it was a Sunday afternoon. If this had been a nighttime, if it had been on the wrong day, if our firefighters hadn't have been home, if they'd have been at work, we wouldn't have been knocking on people's doors and saving their lives like this. So, we do a couple things. We do a lot of work with our towns on floodplain regulations. That keeps us from going to the not-so-bright place in the first place. And Pete Fellows, who's in the back there, he and I work directly with towns on this a lot. We're certified flood managers, and I'm sure Nate's shop has equal stuff too over there to work directly with towns to adopt those flood regulations. People call us on all sorts of little odds and ends questions and get them the right answers back. We were lucky enough, I would say lucky in a certain sort of way, to actually be the statewide leader on buyouts in Vermont. There are about 130, now maybe 140 buyouts in over 40 towns in Vermont. About $40 million of about 10 million of that's coming through us, I think, is going to that. All of these houses are in our region, just a small handset of the houses. This one here, in particular in West Hartford, Pittsfield, Rochester, and Rochester over here. But some CDBG, some Community Development Block Grant money came from the Housing, Department of Housing and Urban Development. And that money is used to match FEMA money to give us 100% money so we can buy out these people's houses. So many homeowners got their full value of their house before the flood paid to them. It took a while, it took 2, 3, maybe 4 years sometimes to get that to happen. But It made these people's lives so much better when on that day, it got so much worse. Another thing we are doing, of course, is we're working on culverts. Now, I was talking to somebody before the meeting about culverts. Culverts are the non-sexy part of climate change adaptation, but they are absolutely important. So anytime your town is working on culverts, support them out there. This is obviously a bad culvert on the left, but we do inventories of culverts so that your town knows where all 846 culverts that they own are in town, and that's about an average number, and it's hard to keep that in your head. We also are doing work to actually upgrade the road infrastructure. This picture on the right I'm especially proud of, and this is largely due to the work of Rita Cito in our office, who's actually married to Nate in your office. Rita's our transportation planner, and you can't have her. But she got several $100,000 to move this road. This is in the town of Royalton, Gilman Road, where it was too close to the river. Everybody found that out during Irene, and instead of actually just trying to harden the river edge, we're able to actually move the road away. A much better, safer outcome for the road, and a better thing for the river out there. And that's it for me, and now we're going to go on to Nate. So thank you.
Yes, you can imagine what our conversations, my wife and I, at night, talking about all sorts of different planning issues. But again, my name is Nate Miller, and I'm going to talk a little bit to start out from mitigation from our perspective about the successes that we've had in our region with public transportation. And there's a long history of the Upper Valley Lake Sunapee Regional Planning Commission being leaders in the development of public transportation in our region. We developed the first feasibility study in 1976 for public transportation in our communities. In 1977 and 1978, we developed the first transit plan. And in 1981, Advanced Transit was formed as a program at that time of the Grafton County Senior Citizens Council. And so this chart shows fixed route ridership on Advanced Transit's network from 1991 to 2015. And the red line shows when the system became free fare. In other words, due to our partner institutions, Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center and Dartmouth College, private contributions from those institutions bought out the fare box, essentially, from Advanced Transit, meaning that anybody who wanted to use Advanced Transit system could just get on the bus and go where they wish to go. You can see what that did for ridership in our region. Last year, another all-time record, close to 600,000 fixed route rides. If you include Advanced Transit shuttle services, it's approaching 1 million rides. That's more rides, fixed route and shuttle, than Nashua, New Hampshire system, Manchester, New Hampshire system, Concord, New Hampshire system, here serving a population base of 40,000 people in 6 communities. That's really impressive, and everybody in this region should be especially proud of what Advanced Transit has accomplished, because many of the folks in this room have had a part of that, including Vital Communities. I personally serve on Advanced Transit's board of directors. I chair their planning committee, so I've been very involved in what's happened in Advanced Transit for the last almost 10 years now. So that gives you a sense of the success. And that really, that ridership, it's more than half of the riders are riding by choice. They have a car that they could use to get from point A to point B, yet they choose to take Advanced Transit. That spells very good things for greenhouse gas emissions, for air quality in our region, that percentage of riders are riding by choice. We've also worked very closely with Advanced Transit to make improvements to their fleet. And on the right, you see a picture of a diesel-electric hybrid bus that is in service. On the roof of that bus, you'll notice a big thing on the back of the bus. That's the battery pack. That's a hybrid, diesel hybrid electric bus. I took this photo in Hartford, Connecticut. I was doing a presentation for the Federal Transit Administration. This was the first bus. It was on its way to be delivered to Advanced Transit, and the manufacturer was showing it off at this conference that I happened to be at. You can see the plastic wrap on the front, so I snapped this photo before it was even delivered to Advanced Transit. But the modernization of the fleet has also paid very big dividends in terms of air quality. Our nitrogen oxide emissions from Advanced Transit's fleet have gone down more than 20%. And as the fleet continues to modernize, as we get more diesel-electric hybrid buses in service, those numbers will continue to improve. Our regional plan also is very, very strong in laying out improvements that we need to continue to make to build our public transportation system in the future. This is a map from our regional plan. Our plan lays out almost 24 different improvement options. The ones that we're really focusing on right now are connecting our region's two largest population and employment centers, the city of Lebanon and the city of Claremont, to each other with public transportation, and then filling a gap in our service along the Interstate 89 corridor from New London to Grantham, to London to Springfield to Grantham to Enfield to Lebanon and Hanover. That's the missing spoke on our wheel, so to speak. It's the only major corridor in our region that doesn't have service into the Upper Valley Employment Center, and we're looking to fill that gap. Also, similar to what Kevin had mentioned that the Two Rivers Ottaquechee Regional Commission was doing with their communities, we also provide assistance to our towns for developing energy chapters for local master plans. This map comes from a project that we worked on in the city of Lebanon, looking at a street light analysis and developing a plan where, similar to what Two Rivers has done in Hartford, Vermont, developing a similar plan for the city of Lebanon. And we also coordinate with our state Office of Energy and Planning to make sure that our local needs, the needs of our region's communities, are reflected in statewide energy planning processes. On the adaptation side of things, Erich mentioned the great work that has been done by Dr. Cameron Wake of the University of New Hampshire. New Hampshire's regional planning commissions actually pooled funds and underwrote a majority of the costs of that study. So that study that wouldn't have happened without funding contributions by New Hampshire's regional planning commissions. Our region is actually, there are two reports. There's a Northern New Hampshire climate report and a Southern New Hampshire climate report. Believe it or not, our region is included in the Southern New Hampshire report. So that's why I show that slide here. But this, if you've ever looked through that report, it is a trove of data and information that really will form the foundation for continued work by folks like Erich and scientists around New Hampshire and around northern New England that we can use as a foundational research in adaptation planning. We've also done a lot of work similar to what Kevin mentioned on working with communities to improve their culverts. And we, in particular, have been working with our state partners, not only our other regional planning commissions in New Hampshire, but our state partners at the Department of Transportation, the Department of Environmental Services, and the Fish and Game Department to completely review and improve how data about culverts is collected in New Hampshire. We now have very, very comprehensive data collection efforts ongoing for our culverts across the state. No matter if culvert data is being collected in Portsmouth, New Hampshire on the seacoast, in Keene, New Hampshire, or on the western part of the state, or far north, data is being collected the same way, and it can fill all of the needs for permitting that communities would need to upsize their culverts. 15 bank full widths are measured as part of that process. And from that data, communities can really enhance how they model their stormwater efforts and how they prioritize which culverts need to be upsized or improved. And the city of Lebanon right now is in the process of developing some starting point modeling for stormwater based on a stream crossing culvert inventory that we did using this framework. Lastly, I want to note the good work that's been happening over the last 6 to 8 months. It's been a partnership between the Regional Planning Commission and the Upper Valley Public Health Council, as well as the Upper Valley Adaptation Workgroup, to develop a climate and health plan for our region. And it focuses on the health impacts of climate change. And that's not just the increasing hospitalizations from heat waves and extended periods of time over 90 degrees, but addresses the disease and contaminants that come from standing water after flooding, for instance, and even additionally, the mental health issues that come from these severe weather events. A lot of people deal with post-traumatic stress disorder. They have real mental health issues as a result of having experienced some of the severe weather events, having their homes threatened, in some cases their homes destroyed. These are public health issues that are really starting to rise in their understanding within our region. And we'll be working with our partners to implement this plan over the coming months. So with that, I think I've probably reached my 10-minute time limit, and I will yield the floor to Tom Roberts of Vital Communities.
Let's see. Great. So I've put together a few slides on some of our work, and if you had a chance to see the posters that we had up here as well. Again, just to replay the slide from before about our work, and again, using this frame of these three areas of social capital, economy, and energy, and that we've really focused on, and really focused the work in all these areas around climate change. So in the energy area, we have two programs. One, primarily sort of the headline program that you probably heard about, hard to miss over the last several years, is our Solarize Upper Valley program. Again, the overall goal, we're aligned with Vermont's goal of having 90% renewable energy by 2050. We're also trying to bring about whatever efficiencies we can in our energy use. And again, with many of these strategies we've seen, this is mitigation in the short term, and it's really adaptive strategies in the long term. So with Solarize, there were a set of simple, elegant elements to Solarize. Bring people together in a single town or a couple of towns, draw on existing work of local energy committees, have each community select an installer, have the installer agree to lower the installation price for the more people, the more households that sign up, have a deadline. It's amazing what a deadline can do, we all know, for homeowners to sign up, and then have a highly visible local marketing that's brought about by the local communities. And these elements, along with a well-executed campaign, thanks on our end to our energy program manager, Sarah Simons, led in just 2 years to 377 homes under contract for solar panels, and hundreds of more folks who may have met with an installer and not been able to put it in, but who came away with knowledge and a sense of what's possible with regard to solar panels, so that maybe down the road they could make a roof repair or remove some trees, or when they purchase a new home, or perhaps take part in group solar efforts off-site. You can see some of the carbon dioxide emission results from those efforts. Again, these are on an annual basis. And I would just say that, our direct involvement with Solarize has come to an end, and Sarah's put together a toolkit for towns who'd like to try to continue to take advantage of the expansion of tax credits that took place at the federal level, so that they could host their own Solarize efforts. She and Bob Walker, whose Surge program merged with Vital Communities at the end of last year, she and Bob are working together to develop the next energy efficiency and renewable energy initiative. So stay tuned for that. On the transportation side, you've already heard a fair amount about that. Aaron Brown, who's here tonight, is our program manager, and we do our work on energy, on transportation through the Transportation Management Association, which is made up of local businesses, municipalities, the planning commissions, nonprofits, and individuals. And they've got a very simple and focused goal, which is to reduce driving alone. That's been the primary vehicle for that, has been Smart Commute, which has been employer-based at the beginning. It's now become town-based as well. And they focus on, as you know, what you've heard about, trying to get folks to use public transportation with advanced transit, Stagecoach, and other providers, carpooling, bicycling, and walking, and telecommuting. There have been, you know, examples of some of the initiatives that they've been involved with at Hypertherm. Since starting a per diem carpool benefit program in 2012, employees have avoided over 2 million drive-alone miles. Aaron tells me that's 86 trips around the world, and really significant with a small per diem incentive. At Dartmouth-Hitchcock, they've created 200 premium parking spaces for carpoolers that are filled almost every day, right? Nice close-in spot if you're carpooling. King Arthur Flower and at least 3 other local businesses have started bike share programs so that rides during the day can be made without a car. And again, you know, using some of these techniques once a week in a 5-day work week can produce up to a 20% reduction in fossil fuel usage. And many folks, many of these employees and many of these folks who are using these alternatives are able to do that 4 or even 5 times a week. And again, you can see some of the aggregate carbon savings from these efforts. So again, on the economy side, let me just talk on a couple of pieces. And again, I'm going to talk about adaptation in a broader way. How do we adapt to the change that's coming? And one of the areas that we're working on and have long been is agriculture, right? So if we can build a sustainable agriculture in our area, that's something that will serve us in the future, and we can continue to do better with. So we're part of a statewide goal in Vermont and also in, I believe, in New Hampshire to try to double the amount of local food that's consumed. Because buying and consuming that local food is something that will you know, help to add to that sustainable agricultural economy. We do that through a couple of ways. The Valley Farm Fresh marketing campaign that you see there, the poster on the upper left, that was based on market research that the next 2 groups that we can look to expand their use of local foods are men who cook and families with young children. We'll be working at farmers markets this summer and other places to put on demonstrations. We continue to work with local businesses to have them do CSAs in their parking lots outside of their businesses, something that, again, is spreading and encouraging the use of local food. We also have our Upper Valley Farm to School program, which continues to work with teachers and food service folks and volunteers to get children to try local food and then to bring that home to their parents. And we also run programs to support new farmers in the Upper Valley. A brief mention, our corporate council brings together top employers and businesses in the Upper Valley on a bi-monthly basis. They're a sounding board for economic issues and a learning space for business. Over the years, they've taken on a number of initiatives. 2 of them have included really being strongly involved with the transportation work that I talked about before. They've also formed an energy work group composed of facility managers who've worked together, sharing ideas about how to make their businesses more efficient. And there's just a quick list of some of the businesses who participate in that. And then finally, just on the social capital side, Vital Communities has long been working on increasing social capital in the Upper Valley. It's really in our DNA. It's the work of the founding board members, 15 or 20 years ago, and Len Cadwallader. That's really what the organization was built on, trying to foster community and civic engagement, community stewardship, resilience, and developing a strong sense of place. In many ways, I believe there's nothing more important to help us adapt to the impacts of climate change than to be continuing to weave our communities together, to be bridging social networks and building social capital. And just a couple of quick examples of the way we do that through our Leadership Upper Valley program that brings 30 folks together each year to learn and develop together as leaders. There's now nearly 200 alumni of that organization, a couple of whom are here tonight. And they're working and to use their leadership skills out in the community on issues relating to energy and transportation, those we've been talking about here tonight. Our Valley Quest program is a treasure hunt program for people of all ages that gets people out to experience our community, to learn more about history and the natural resources that are there. And again, we host 20 town listservs, which again is a vital way for folks to connect with each other. So that's a quick tour of some of the work at Vital Communities that relates to mitigation and to adaptation. And I think we're coming over to Alex. Great.
Okay, so I actually just have the honor here just to kind of wrap us up tonight. And first thing, I just want to say I'm so heartened by the examples of these organizations and the work that you guys are doing, both in the mitigation and the adaptation. I think we can all agree that we have some pretty, significant objectives and agenda ahead of us. And to be able to see the work that's already been accomplished in our communities is just heartening. And I think we need to do more of it. So keep up the great work. We will continue to partner together. So before I wrap up, I'm just going to share a couple of next steps and an opportunity, an invitation for you guys to join us. But before I do that, why don't we take just a couple of minutes in case there's anybody who has any thoughts, comments, reflections on tonight's evening. I'd like to invite that. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm from the town of Lyme, representative to the Lake Sunapee Upper Valley Regional Planning Commission. I just want to bring something to your attention that has physical and environmental consequences that are sort of similar to some of the things we've been talking about here. And that is that Lyme has closed, as many of you may know, River Road, and is causing one hell of an uproar, not only in the town of Lyme, because to fix the situation, we may be on the hook for literally millions of dollars. We already had to repair 800 feet of river road north of the East Thetford Bridge to the tune of about $600,000 of just town money. The story is that the situation is that the relicensing, or the Wilder Dam, the power dam, raises and lowers the water level of Connecticut River, by 3 to 5 feet a day sometimes. And it causes piping, what's being called piping. When the water goes up, it saturates the soil, and then when the water goes down, some of that soil, which is saturated, fluidized, if you will, runs into the river. And we've got cavernous situations on the banks that are 10 to 20 feet deep, 10 to 20 feet wide, 8, 10 feet high, that sort of thing. And so this affects both states because it turns out River Road is a very popular commuting route from Thetford and parts of Vermont in that direction, 113, to avoid the Ledyard Bridge because that's so backed up in the morning. Folks come over the East Thetford Bridge and go down River Road to Hanover. So basically, the relicensing of the Wilder Dam, by TransCanada, has been going on for several years, the environmental impact statements. We're expecting the sort of non-study, it seems, of this issue of piping and the consequences of the dam, of the water going up and down. We expect that part of the report to be at the end of February. The town has been given a large length of time of 2 weeks to respond. And to try to get, I mean, it's a classic example of externalities where the cost of production of the power is not reflected, which includes millions of dollars of environmental consequences up and down the river, is not reflected in the rates used that are charged for the power. So anyway, I say this, I get up here and rabble-rouse here a little bit because I'm wondering, there must be, for example, towns on the Vermont side who are facing, possibly similar, maybe not quite so dramatic situations, and expertise on the Vermont side or up and down on the New Hampshire side of the river. To anybody who's concerned, I'd love to talk to them because we're drafting, our response to the studies or non-studies of this, which are due out, by the end of February in our great 2-week window. And if there are people here who have expertise in dealing with FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, who are, in charge of permitting the water dam to continue, causing these externalities, if you will. I'd love to talk to anybody who has any kind of expertise along this line. Thanks.
Thank you. Other thoughts, comments? Yes, sir.
I'm very encouraged by all of this work that's being done. But I've often felt that advocacy also could play a role, and I realize that that can be difficult politically. But it seems to me that if your organizations are already joining forces, any opportunity that you may have to make public statements or raise awareness. A lot of this work is excellent. It definitely addresses the issue, but I doubt that the average person is aware of why it's being done, or the climate side of this work. And so, to the extent that I can, I'd like to encourage you to take more of a leadership role vocally and actually get the messages out to the public, because I think that they will support you tremendously once they become up to speed with the issues that are going on.
Excellent point. Thank you so much. Yeah.
To that end, there's a national foundation called the Certina Foundation. I'm Kevin Peterson with the Hampshire Charitable Foundation. And several years ago, they put together some research on how to talk about these issues in a value-based way that sort of gets beyond the hot button questions of whether you're talking about human-caused climate change, and how to get to core local values around efficient use of dollars and economy and civic engagement and that sort of thing. And it's a widely available report. I think, Alex, you may have it already. I think I sent it to you. If not, we can get a copy. And it could be a useful read for anyone who's got to talk about this within your own community or on your planning board, with your board of selectmen, to get beyond the buzzword of climate change that can be so polarizing and get down to the real impacts and issues that are related to community values that everyone in this room is dealing with. So it's an excellent publication, and it's been used all over the country.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. So we will make that available to all 3 core organizations, and then you guys can certainly access that. So thank you for good. Other thoughts? Questions? Yes.
Hi, I'm Lizanne Payton. If anybody hasn't seen the work of the Coastal Adaptation Workgroup, which Sherry's also very involved in, they were able to use the LiDAR mapping of very small incremental changes in elevation to do very precise neighborhood maps of where your neighborhood would be flooded or where key roads would be flooded under different flooding and sea rise scenarios. And I don't know if the regional planning commissions might play a role or know if that's coming here. I heard that LiDAR mapping was beginning to happen over here. But I would think the RPC board members might be very interested in seeing what do these maps look like. It's really easy to find copies of them to say, oh, if my town had that, I bet a lot of people could get on board with the discussion.
Yeah, just say, my understanding is that LiDAR is happening all the way up and down this region within the next, I think, months to year.
Late summer.
Late summer, yeah. So I mean, that went out in an email to my department because the geologists are all very excited to see those maps too. But I think it'd be a great tool for planning and for communicating to the public.
It just got flown for New Hampshire and it's coming for Vermont because every time I go to Montpelier, I scream bloody murder about it. And for those of you who know me, you know I can do that.
Okay, so we're getting to the end of our time here. So just a couple of additional comments in terms of inviting you all to continue in this conversation. First of all, I really encourage you to take what you've learned tonight, continue the conversations within your communities. Within the organizations that hosted tonight, we will certainly be active partners and love to support you in that. To that end, the Upper Valley Adaptation Workgroup over the next years would really like to be able to get to where the Coastal Adaptation Workgroup has gotten down in the coastal region of New Hampshire, which is working with individual communities who are ready to look at this issue so that we could go through a process of engaging stakeholders, having leaders making decisions around what are the priorities that are important to you as an individual community. And we would like to support you in that with facilitation, technical assistance, and whatnot. So we'll be working with the three organizations that spoke tonight to identify towns. And so if that's of interest, continue to be thinking about that. And over the next year or so, we'll look for opportunities and some funding to be able to pursue that. In the very short term, the project that that Nate had mentioned, which is the Climate and Health Project, we're actually going to be doing a forum coming up in about 2 months. So on March 30th, you had a save the date flyer on your seat. On March 30th, we're going to be doing a program at Dartmouth Hitchcock, and that is going to be looking at climate change and the impacts to health, and this will be a community forum. We're going to be targeting a target audience of municipal leaders, public health professionals, emergency service providers, but then also open it to the entire community. We're going to be looking very specifically at the types of health risks and challenges we need to anticipate and some proaction steps we can take to start to address those risks. Within that, we're going to be advancing the climate and health grant that the Upper Valley, the Public Health Council of the Upper Valley Adaptation Workgroup are working together on, which is looking at heat stress with the aging population, with the elders in our communities. And we're going to be doing some specific actions where we're going to be designing some interventions that we can do to be more supportive to our members of the community with respect to heat stress in the coming 6 months. So you guys will have a chance to participate in that as well. But I would invite you please to come join us for this forum as well. We'd love to see you there. Bring any friends and family that you would like to bring as well. So with that, yes, was there a question?
Well, it's a comment.
Yes.
I'm a member of the Upper Valley Lake Sunapee Regional Planning Commission and also the Upper Valley Housing Coalition. And I had the fortunate phase in my life where I was town planner of Hanover. And there's a seamless web between many of the issues that are facing regions and municipalities. Just some examples. Lots and lots of people, and there are statistics about it, have to commute long ways, use up a lot of time from they could otherwise spend with their family and working for their own community. In the car, spewing carbon because they can't afford to live any closer, because we don't provide the housing of the types and costs that they can afford because of what they get paid. The additional part of that seamless web is land use regulations that allow for what's called smart roads. We're optimizing the use of existing municipal infrastructure, roads, sewer lines, water lines, hydrants, even snowplow routes, in order to make the functioning of our communities more efficient. I can't tell you how much opposition I've seen to efforts done by municipalities and by groups opposing development of more housing, particularly affordable housing, and for increased density and increased diversity of housing within built-up areas. opposition to landowners who wish to put in solar panels and who wish to put up windmills, from people who fear that those changes will be detrimental to them personally, and without regard to how beneficial they'll be to the community, to the region, and to the planet. And I think one of the big goals we have is focusing on making people aware of that seamless web of so many factors, improvement factors that can be used together in a synergy. And recognize that they have a responsibility to look after and act and vote for measures and fund measures that will benefit the community, the region, and the world. And we need to, all of our organizations need to try to make that message in a very clear and compelling way.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, with all of our organizations, that's an excellent cue. I'd like to invite Tom and Nate to come on up, and Eric, come on up, because we're going to close. And I just want to thank you all for helping to make this evening very nice and informative. I hope this is not the last such meeting, but maybe the first such meeting of our organizations going forward. And thank you all for coming, because we don't get to do our work unless you support it.